if you guys aren't moving forward, you're moving backwards. In a way, commercial real estate is sort of like that. If you're not doing value add, you're going backwards and you're exposed if there's a big correction, certainly over 20%, right? So that's kind of where the heavier value add might make more sense, although there is risk with construction, but it's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of like a football game, right? If you're down by a couple of touchdowns, you can't just run the ball. You got to go throw it.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today, I'm here with Lane Kawaoka. Lane was on the show, I'm not even sure, probably two plus years ago. And super excited to have you on and catch up and kind of see what's the same, what's different, what's changed for you over the last few years. So thanks for coming on the show today, Lane. I appreciate you taking the time. I know we're both busy, so I appreciate this chance to connect. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me again, Jason. Appreciate it.
Do you want to start with just a rundown of background, let listeners remember you? They can obviously check out the other episode, but a little bit of a background, and then we'll talk about what's been new.
Yeah. So I guess origin story.
Tony,
I
first,
graduated college 2007 with an engineering degree. Started to work for the man, and didn't really like it. But at that point, just saving my money to buy a house to live in. Bought that first house a couple years out of college, saving 80 grand for a down payment, and started to rent it out because I was working on the road all the time for work. And kind of lucky, right? Kind of good wave. 2009, bought that property, and then I realized, well, I should do this again and again and again. Bought a duplex in Seattle. Then I started to buy these turnkey rentals in Birmingham, Atlanta, Indianapolis. Had 11 of those in 2015. And then I realized and started to meet other accredited investors, and I realized that they were dumping their single family homes for, syndication deals. And that was kind of, got more involved in that and started to invest in some deals. Sometimes the operators that you first interact with aren't the greatest, especially if they're, kind of getting started. And that was kind of where I was like, well, I'm just going to do this on my own. So we started to syndicate Class C assets that were a little smaller, 50, 100 units, that size, because that's all we could afford back then. But yeah, you can make a lot of money doing that, and we did. But it's kind of a headache dealing with that class of tenants. Things break all the time too. Yeah. We started to do Class B, larger deals. That was good for a while, and then we also started to develop in 2020. I guess you'd call it Class A multifamily because it's brand new, but it's essentially workforce housing. But yeah, that brings us to kind of present day, right? In the 2022, 2023 correction. I mean, good 10, 12 years of a good bull run.
Yeah, went well for a lot of people for a long time, and then those corrections can create a fair bit of hurt in a short time. You had quite a large portfolio when we spoke last time, and things were going quite well. And what's been your experience over these last couple of years? And we are at end of, or I guess Q3 of 2024, and it was we're 2 years plus into when interest rates started rising, and things changed a little bit in the real estate market. What's been your experience over that time?
Yeah, I mean, just like everybody else, prices came down 20%, 30% across the country. Some of the hotter markets like Phoenix, I think Atlanta, I'm not in Atlanta anymore, but like those markets came down 30% at least off the peaks. So if you're a student of the game and you understand capital stacks, a lot of these deals had 70-80% leverage. So if you lose 20-30%, you're underwater on your note. And that's fine if you have 30-year debt, but that's not how commercial projects are put together. Typically, it's anywhere from 1 year to 15 years at the very most. And if you're in a bridge notes are usually 3 years or less. Unfortunately, your little ticker is coming up for renewal in the time where the values are low.
Yeah, it's been certainly a lesson in debt structures and exit strategies for a lot of people. I think for me, the take home lessons have been very much about those two things. Like, don't be in a position where you have to exit, right? So be able to make that choice. And as you mentioned with commercial loans, you're typically going to, it's not like you have an infinite amount of time, but you want to have probably a 5-7 year window of time where you can choose based on the market as to when it's time to exit, rather than, oh, we have to execute a business plan, a value add strategy, and turn everything around and sort of re-up in 2 years. It just doesn't, it worked for a time, but it doesn't work in today's market. Have you pivoted at all? What have you done sort of tactically with your portfolio and acquisitions, or what have you been doing since 2022?
Yeah, I mean, I think we you have to acknowledge, there's lessons learned, but what we experienced here was like a category 5 storm, right? 40-year high interest rates. Most corrections, you don't see a 20-30% correction. That's why you invest in real estate. It's normally like the 10% or even less than that. But what that has done obviously is exposes, what capital or equity that was there. And this is, I think, why in 2020 we started to develop properties, because when you develop, you're doing a lot more value add. And again, I'm not saying all deals are the same, right? But most cosmetic value add deals where you're changing out the appliances, new flooring, new paint job, new playground equipment, 5-10 grand per unit, bump the rents up $150-$250. If that performer supposedly says that, right? That's all you're doing at the end of the day in those types of projects is bumping the net operating income by 10-20%. So even if you were able to implement the entire business plan, if the market corrects 20%, you're underwater, right? So that's kind of where some investors, I mean, this is like 2016 to 2020, they were we used to call some of these projects yield plays. Now nobody calls them because cash flow has gone away. But in these deals, it was like, we're barely doing anything, and we're just going to kind of buy and hold. But you just can't do that, right? You just can't. It's kind of like marriage, they say. If you guys aren't moving forward, you're moving backwards. In a way, commercial real estate is sort of like that. If you're not doing value add, you're going backwards and you're exposed if there's a big correction, certainly over 20%, right? So that's kind of where the heavier value add might make more sense, although there is risk with construction, but it's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of like a football game, right? If you're down by a couple of touchdowns, you can't just run the ball. You got to go throw it in the same way. So that's what we found. I mean, kind of a perfect example. In 2020, we started a 200 unit in Huntsville, and these things normally they take about a year to construct at least. So we came out of our construction loan November 2022, and if people recall, the summer of 22 was when interest rates started to go up, and everybody laughed and didn't think it was going to go as much as it did, right?
Yeah.
But it had been going up July, August, September, October, and by November came around, we're like, oh shoot, this is real, right? And it's not going to be going back down anytime soon.
Yeah.
So the project was already in motion, right? We were already in construction and coming out of our out of our construction loan or takeout loan. But we we even with elevated interest rates, we were able to refinance without putting any in money, and because we had created so much value there, than a Pedley, lipstick on a pig cosmetic renovation where you just bump the rents up and get 10-20% NOI. So I think that kind of reiterated, like, you gotta add tremendous value. If not, you're exposed in these like 1 out of 10-year corrections that we had.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think, as you mentioned, there's kind of two ways to add tremendous value. So, start new, or you've got to take on that C-class property, the old something older that really needs heavy value add, and there's some risk with either, but you have, as you said, if you're actually able to create value, then that's really kind of the only way to counteract what happens when the market takes away value just by cap rate expansion.
Yeah. I mean, it's again like the marriage counseling example. Just by you holding hands and kissing once in a while may not save the marriage. Okay, you got to do
Yeah.
bigger things
Yeah.
a lot of times, right? And especially when tough times come, like a recession, or relationships goes through tough seasons, right?
And I mean, to I guess to contrast, for a little while that was working, right? For whatever 3, 4, or 5 years, people were able to do that, lipstick on a pig, and put bump rents up so much. There was tremendous. I mean, as you said, the interest rate thing was kind of once in a lifetime, and they raised interest rates more in a shorter time than has ever happened historically. So no one could have predicted that because it has never happened before. I also think, again, we can look at all this in hindsight and be
Yeah, we're all
sound
they're all geniuses, right?
right. We
Like,
could
what
sound
kind of
smarter
idiots would
now,
buy at the
right?
peak of the market? It's
Right.
like, well,
But it's like also when rents were going up so dramatically in a short period of time, that's not sustainable either, right? So it's just kind of like understanding that the reality of real estate is it is a long-term play, and trying to, especially commercial real estate, apartment buildings, it's trying to compress that into a 1 or 2 year time frame is just really dramatically increasing your risk. So you're either want to be, if you're long term, you're looking for cash flow, or you're looking for that, so like a really big value add strategy, whether that's new construction or something, some heavy value add business plan. With your development project, I mean, you said you were able to get it refinanced, which is great. I know, for a long time everybody thought they were almost like doing Burr with commercial, where it's like, oh, we'll do our value add strategy and then we'll refinance it, and the rates are so low, we'll get all this money out, and there were some strategies that were based on that refinance. What are you, so that one started before rates went up, and then you kind of caught in a little bit in the storm, but were able to survive it. What about since then? What have you been doing, kind of post the interest rates, I guess, leveling out?
yeah, I mean, there was another project that we actually just got 100% certificates of occupancy the other week. That one will be fine too, but there became a point, and it's hard to say, maybe the middle of 2023, let's just call it that, or beginning of 2023, like all our new projects, we kind of just put on a halt, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at some point when you're looking at a 10-12% construction loan, it's like you're looking outside the house and it's like a blizzard outside, you're like, I'm just gonna wait, right?
Right.
And that's sort of what, like, those where the capital markets took some of those loans, like, but we would buy the land, right, without debt, so it's not like we have a ticking time bomb on our hand. We kind of just have to just wait until the storm
Yeah.
proceeds, then we head outside and make hay at that point. But that's just, I mean, that's what people have heard the story of, like, right now there's a lot of supply hitting the market right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because after 2020 to 2022, at the end, let's just call it January 2023, everybody, was taking advantage of this easy money, right? This cheap
Mhm.
money. And then obviously January 2023, the interest rates had already been going up, but I certainly think at that point, the critical mass where people are like, nah, let's not get this, initiate this construction loan and start building.
Yep.
Like, let's sit on the sidelines. And that's what we did too. That's where, it's kind of like, I guess maybe like, Ukraine and Russia, right? They're saying like with the war, like people aren't having kids, right? Or I guess that was kind of what the pandemic, right? People stop having kids, and kids, you take 9 months for them to come out. Construction projects take 2 to 3 years to be born. So if people stop having construction babies in January 2023, you're gonna see the new supplies drop off a cliff and add 2 3 years on top of that. So
Yeah.
that's kind of right now. We're just kind of waiting and just getting. We want, as soon as things open up, we're gonna head out there because there's gonna be a huge lull of supply in 2025, 2026, not hitting the market, and it's a great opportunity for the early adopters there. But that's kind of like that's. I mean, it's just math, right? Your supply and demand. Supply is your new inventory coming online, and you can see what's happening 2 to 3 years in the future with that stuff. What's harder to model is demand, and that's where it's like population growth, economy, right? But at least you know what the supply side of the equation is.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a lot of new supply that's kind of been hitting now, and so that has, it's a double-edged sword, right? You've got your debt issues on these existing assets, and then also, oh, by the way, rent growth has slowed, stopped, if not gone negative a little bit here, and then you just don't have the same demand because there's new product coming online, and they're doing lease up specials and things like that. So they're renting a brand new building for less than you can rent your 1985 whatever value add project. That will level out because now once all of this supply gets absorbed, as you said, nobody started new construction projects, and so we're going to now start to tilt the scale in the other direction in 25, 26. So what if you're, I guess, would you talk a little bit about kind of the development process? We really haven't talked about that a lot on the show, and you've touched on some of the components of it where, oh, we bought the land without any debt, but so we can sit and wait. But maybe just give people a high level what that looks like, the process, how that works.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's pretty simple, right? I mean, people who've done a house flip, it kind of works the same way. You acquire the land. I mean, a lot of these apartment buildings, you need at least 12, 15 acres to build. So that's rare, right? Especially when you're trying to pick a place in the path of progress.
Right.
A lot of the path of progress, I mean, in growing cities, you kind of know what it looks like. It either, I mean, it's rare to find infill type of property, right? You're not going to find 10 plus acres just undeveloped in a good area, right? That just doesn't happen. So what you're having to do is kind of buying on that path or that line of development. So like if in your local area, you have the highway system. You think of the next highway exit that nothing is really there yet, or maybe they have a grocery store, but the big box stores haven't come in yet. That's kind of, sort of indicative of that line that you buy on. And there you can find these larger tracts of land out there. So that's typically what we'll do. Like for example, Huntsville, Alabama, if you go out to the west side of town, you have like the new minor league baseball stadium, right? And all the newer shopping mall out there. Well, our development is the next exit beyond that, right? So that's kind of the example where we'll build these types of things. Again, non infield type of location. So buy that land, and then it's just, this is kind of why we wanted to kind of get more involved in this, because to get the loans for the construction loan, you need to have legit experience doing this stuff. It's not like four guys who have a net worth of $2 million each can qualify for a debt of 8 million. And one guy was supposedly a key principal on another deal. That doesn't fly in construction loans. You need to know who actually is the dude doing it, and did he actually do it? Not, oh yeah, he signed on some debt. Has the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac experience, and that's why we saw that as a barrier to entry, and barrier to entries are known as great opportunities because that really thins the herd, thins the competition that you have to go after, and that was kind of where a lot of people buy 200, 400 unit apartment complexes, and we felt the pressure, competing with these, everybody. I mean, it's a multifamily, and it's kind of a good thing and a bad thing at the same time. It's a very liquid market. People buy and sell, and it's not like a private equity deal where it's sort of off market. To me, I don't really buy into the whole idea if you have a 50 unit or 100 unit market complex and you're 80% plus occupied, it's all on market. It might just go to a few of proven serious buyers, but to me, that's still on market to me.
Right.
So that was kind of why we wanted to kind of get away from that competition. And then now you need the real expertise. And this is kind of my professional background, being a construction manager, engineer. A lot of it is just project management, and you hire out engineering firms, architects, construction management firms, the contractor. A lot of that is just, a lot what I did in my professional career, managing scope, schedule, budget, and delivering the project.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, from a development standpoint, it certainly needs to be very dialed in, right? Because as you said, it's going to take a year-ish, maybe a little more, or depending on the size, I guess, a little more, a little less to build. What you don't want is inefficiencies because of mismanagement and not, just not hitting the deadlines. And those buildings don't make any money until there's people living in them paying rent. So it's truly a downtime in terms of the actual revenue generated. When you're sourcing the land, what I know you mentioned this kind of in that path of progress. How are you finding the land component of it? Because once you have the land, now you just have to put the pieces together and develop the building.
The land is the hard part, right? I mean, that's why a lot of our investors are like, well, can we do more of these things, right? But the number of in one MSA, a suitable 10, 20 acre piece of land in the path of progress is just you could probably count it on one hand. Whereas suitable apartment deals could run in the hundreds. So you're very limited on supply for that, because you need a big parcel. We're not talking about building little single family homes here. You need a big piece. And maybe that's probably one flaw with our whole business. We're kind of limited by that very finite starting block there. But yeah, a lot of people will, I mean, it's all on market. I mean, you're not gonna have some bozo sell their 12 acre piece of land. This is not little the land academy, buy a piece of land off of 3 drunken brothers who inherited from their grandpa.
Right.
That doesn't happen with these big tracts of land like this.
Yeah.
So what we found, most of the people we bought from were from other developers. So and these people are very, pretty wealthy. I would say 10 to 50 million net worth. And how did they get that net worth? Well, they develop, and they build a pipeline of collecting these types of land. And I think a lot of them, the story was, it's a family business. Obviously, they didn't take it institutional. I don't think we'll ever take it institutional. We always have that kind of family vibe, just like them. And the patriarch just got old, and then, they just, maybe the kids usually take it over, but they may not need that piece of land and just sell it. And they also have the ability to, in some cases, we bought the land contingent on it being zoned residential. because they were developers and they were going to develop it anyways. But a lot of that pre-development is you need patience and time to do that.
Yeah.
And I guess like to your earlier question, like we prefer projects that are the pre-development is already done. So, getting it zoned the right way. A lot of that can
Right.
be a big issue, that can prevent a project from being shovel ready. You may have to take 18 months, 2-3 years to get done. I mean, we have one project like that where we're trying to get annexed into the PUD, so that takes a long time. But I mean, we knew that was part of the whole project and the value add. But ideally, I mean, you have to figure out what your highest and best use is. And I think with us, it's like, we have the development team and we just rock and roll. So let's just grab the land that's shovel ready and let's hit it.
Yeah.
Where there's some operators out there, and it's kind of a unique business plan where they just are pre-developers. They have no intention of building anything. They've never done it, or maybe they have, right? And they don't care
Yeah.
for it, but they just create some BS engineering plans, and they get it pre-developed and zoned, and they submit that in to the county, city, or whatever, and then they get it right to that cusp and sell it to folks like us.
Yep.
So I mean, they're obviously adding value, right? In a way, not physical value, but it's part of this whole like supply chain, in a way of delivering product, housing to the American public out there.
Yeah. As you were sort of talking about it, the pre-development, I'm like, that's just like one of the coolest things about real estate in general is just you can literally sort of be involved at almost any level. And so, like you mentioned, there are people that just buy land that's not ready to be developed and make it ready to be developed, and then sell it to someone, sell it to the developers like yourselves. And it's just a different business model, a different, place in the chain to make your mark. But it adds a lot of value. It takes a lot of time, right? So it allows, as you said, allows you to move faster on your developments, lets you get started building basically right away. But sometimes that, zoning can take months, if not years, to get it, sort of zoned correctly. So I'm sure there are people that do all of the parts, and but I would guess that they have very, very large companies, and so they have a pre-development arm, and then their development construction. It's just you can kind of run it in any capacity that you want, which I think is just a fascinating part about real estate. Is that your main focus now, or are you really just strictly focused on development, or are you doing anything else with your portfolio?
I think if anything, we've expanded like the lobster traps out there. Like I think like the long-term vision is like the developments are like 1/3 of the plays. I think investors like the higher returns there. I don't think that we'll abandon the value add 10-20% NOI bumps that a lot of people do out there. I mean, if it's a deal's good and it kind of drops in our lap, I think we'll do it. If the numbers work, right? I mean, when I mean the numbers, you underwrite it, you use the right reversion cap rates, the right assumptions, and if you hit a certain number, we're game. Let's do it, right? There is a lot of competition in that world, so prices are bid up a little bit, so it's kind of hard to find deals. But I think what also like, going through this period where like there was a time like I guess 18 months ago for about a year, nothing made any sense, and this is obviously validated by the fact that there's all like very low transactions because the prices that these properties were at, it hadn't quite corrected that 20-30% yet, and the interest rates were still high, so it was just kind of a no man's land. I mean, this is why we didn't buy anything from summer 2022 to now. It's been kind of on the dry spell because it's just things don't make sense. They're just too expensive to what the holding costs are. But now, I mean, we're starting to get off the sidelines now, right? I mean, you're starting to see the big guys, Blackstone, all these guys, institutional funds are coming in because the prices have come down to a certain point where even with the high holding costs, things are starting to pencil again. So I think, we focus for like, you never want to be into just one thing, even developments, right? And I think the nice thing about the value add deals is you get the tax benefits right away if passive investors are specifically looking for that. But the other third part of this trifecta, I think, is outside of real estate. I think I'm not gonna. I'll say for myself personally, real estate is what got me to this dance, right? I rode a great wave from 2009 to 2022. I still believe in it. Obviously long-term prospects, the new supply will burn off, then it'll drop off a cliff, and then, all this long-term prospects for America, growing population, especially in the lower middle class, where the rich
Right.
are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. The fundamentals are there. And, the hard thing is if you look at the Chatham financial curve, the interest rates are forecasted to be nowhere where it was pre-2022. They say it's going to go back down to long term to 3%, which means that potentially in our lifetime, the era of free money isn't around. So, with real estate doesn't move very much. That's why like a 20-30% correction is absurd in normal real estate world.
Yep.
But it doesn't normally move very much up or down. But you need leverage for real estate to get the returns most investors are looking for. But if you lose, we might have just lost a big tailwind to our back, which is good financing, good leverage. So this is where, again, just like where I was in 2015 when I connected with other purely passive investors, and what are they doing, emulating what they're doing. And at that time, what I saw is that they were trading in their single family homes for larger apartment deals. I look at my network now of much higher net worth accredited investors, and what I see is they've got a piece of private equity venture capital in their portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
No, you don't get any tax benefits. No, there's no cash flow. It's a hell of a lot more asymmetric. But as I'm starting to uncover this whole puzzle that I call the wealth elevator, that's a part of people's portfolios. So I'm going to shut up and listen to people with a higher net worth than M and try to understand why. And, not to say one's better than the other, but I think what I'm sort of slowly adopting and, getting up to this point, I had 90, 100% of my net worth in real estate projects. Is that right for everybody? I don't know. That's everybody needs to figure it out. I certainly think you need to get out of traditional investments and into alternatives for the better returns and tax benefits. But everybody's going to have their level of buy-in. But for me, I'm not abandoning real estate here. I'm just saying, well, maybe the right blend is 50% or 70%, and let me get 10% in alternatives and also do infinite banking to life insurance on the side to kind of offset that high risk, high return in the private equity venture capital side too. So that's kind of what I'm seeing more long term, kind of coming out of this. And I think everybody's on a different life cycle, right? I mean, that's like in my new book, The Wealth Elevator, I have kind of a pull-out chart where based on where you are at net worth wise, there's different floors to the elevator, and they have different strategies based on what you're investing in. Are you using a retirement fund or not? What are you doing for taxes, infinite banking? Like, there's not a one size fits all. Certainly all of us here are well beyond the basics of Dave Ramsey and Susie Orman. And I think a lot of us too are kind of moving beyond little single family homes as non-accredited investors. So I try to create a book where it's like it tells the steps. Here's what you do when you're 2.5 to 5 mil. Here's 5 mil to 10 mil. We're on the penthouse of the wealth elevator. Because at least speaking for myself, I didn't have any rich uncles or accredited investors around me to kind of piece this together.
Yeah, I think obviously every person's financial situation and goals and whatever is a little bit different, but yeah, there are certain things, talking about sticking with that wealth elevator. I mean, there are certain things at certain levels of wealth accumulation that might change, might also change with your family situation, might change with your age, right? Like you're maybe more willing and able to take risks younger. As you get older, you're more about capital preservation. It's just, and again, it's just personal appetite for risk and interest. But diversification and just getting finding what works for you, and you have to be adaptable because the markets are going to change. We've seen real estate change a lot, and 5 years ago, it was probably a good idea to have 90% of your net worth in real estate. Like, that made a lot of sense. Right now, does that make a lot of sense? Maybe not, but like maybe for some people it does. And you mentioned, the big institutional players are coming back, and their cost of capital is lower. They also are willing to have essentially lower returns than maybe some of the retail investors would. It's just everybody's has a different appetite for risk and returns, and it's just figuring out what that looks like for you. But if you don't do any of it, you're certainly falling behind. I think is the main piece of it. Is you can't just do nothing.
Yeah. I mean, you can. It's just going to take you like 40 years, and you'll be damn near 60 to get your net worth past 2.5, 3 mil.
Yeah.
I mean, the choice is yours. We know what's going to happen if you keep investing for 7, 8% in a non-tax advantage way in traditional investments where the fee structures are a lot in favor of the big institutional Wall Street houses. And we know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So,
certainly been demonstrated time and time again. Well, Lane, let me. I know you talked about your book. I want to make sure that we get to highlight, where people should reach to, or where they can find you if they want to reach out, hear this, and obviously they can grab your book. But tell us what's the best way to connect.
Yeah, they can check out the book on Amazon. It's called The Wealth Elevator. If you guys buy it from there, leave a review. Feel free to shoot us an email with the review, lane@wealthelevator.com, and we'll hook you up with the PDF so you can get or I mean, depends on which one you buy, right? Obviously, like, well, if you buy the book version, we'll get you the audio version and vice versa. I guess that's the new hack these days. People buy both and they sit there with their finger and they thumb through it at 3x speed, right? That's the
read and
way.
Listen at the same time to I guess drive it home better. I don't know. All kinds of. Everybody has their own way to approach books at this point. I wanted to ask you just a final question for you. Sort of based on your experience, what piece of advice would you give to people that are listening to this and they're like, okay, this guy's been doing this for a while, he's successful. What piece of advice would you give to someone who wants to kind of get started? They like the message. What would you tell them?
Well, I mean, I'll ask the question to you again, like, what's their net worth, right? Because your net worth dictates their path. There's different paradigms. No size fits all.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Well, then they should definitely get your book. They can see where they are in the elevator.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're under $1 million net worth, buy little rental properties like I did, get your net worth to $500,000 mil. Then you get to get into value add deals.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks, Lane, for coming back again and sharing your story. I think, like I said, we haven't talked a lot about development, so those will be helpful for people listening. And I think it's actually a topic of interest to me. So I appreciate you being here and sharing with us today. Thank you very much.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?